So the Ottomans had been transformed from the Kai tribe, a Turkish entity which lived in the Anatolian countryside, to an Ottoman beylik, which was a multi-religious, multi-ethnic, prosperous state which traversed two continents, Europe and Asia, or Rumeli and Anatolia. More importantly, they dealt with the Byzantine Empire as equals from now on. Orhan had died and he'd passed rulership to his son, Murad. But Murad's rule would be very different from his father's from the point of view of succession, diplomacy, enemies fought, internal problems, and internal policy. So let's see how he did. So when Orhan died and was buried, he was succeeded by two sons who were half brothers. One was called Murad and the other was called Halil. And Halil's mother was the daughter of the Byzantine emperor. So the emperor in Constantinople really wanted him to succeed Orhan because then he would be favorable to the Byzantine Empire. But unfortunately, Orhan chose Murad, and this resulted to Halil becoming angry, and he decided to rebel against his brother, and in the end they fought it out and Halil was killed, and Murad then went on to rule the Ottoman beylik. From Ertugrul to Osman, from Osman to Orhan, the transition had been smooth, seamless and bloodless, and based upon discussion and consultation. This was the first time that brothers had fought each other to become the ruler once their father had died. The only question is, was this a difference to the norm, or would it become succession culture with the Ottomans? Make sure you subscribe to find out. A conquest early on in the reign of any ruler goes a long way to increasing your popularity and getting acceptance from your subject population. And for that reason, Murad had his eyes on a Byzantine city 200 kilometers north of Constantinople, and it was called Adrianople. And in the year 1369, he took it very easily and changed its name to Edirne, this city that I'm standing in now. And it became the first urban center for the Ottomans in Rumeli, and a very important one because it would lead on to bigger and greater things. His father and his grandfather had adopted the title Ghazi, meaning warrior, but Murad adopted the title Sultan. The reason for this, he wanted to make a statement. He wanted to show to people and tell people, I'm no longer just a Turk on a horse running around Anatolia. I am the leader of a supreme power, a supreme empire. And he even moved his capital from Bursa to Edirne. And in that regard, he's very, very much like his grandfather Osman Ghazi, who was attempting to move the capital from Soghut to Bursa and get his people onto the next land, the next project, the next frontier. And for Murad, he was in a new land with a new frontier and a new project, and that project was the Balkans. And in order for him to be successful in this new project, he would need new titles, a new capital, and new strategies to deal with the new population that he would face in the Balkans. The Balkans is an area of the world which for long periods of time was caught between the Catholic West and the Orthodox East. They'd either been subjugated by the Western Roman Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire based in Constantinople, who were of a Greek ethnicity. The majority of the people in the Balkans were of a Slavic ethnicity. When Murad was ruling Edirne, the Byzantine Empire was just a city-state and completely surrounded by the Ottoman Empire. The main players in southeastern Europe were the Serbian Empire and the Bulgarian Empire, and Murad would need a mixture of wars, diplomacy and good policy to incorporate the Balkans and the Slavic peoples into his new project in Rumeli. One policy that he enacted was something called the devshirme, which is a Turkish word which means the blood tax, and it entailed Christian boys from the Balkans being taken from their villages, brought here to Edirne, being converted to Islam, given a top class education, and given really good military training, and they became the adopted children of Murad, of the Sultan. Upon graduation from their education, they either attained high positions in the military or in the political circles of the Ottomans. So Murad gained a lot of new recruits for the expansion that he was planning. The military force that was formed from this policy was called the Janissaries, and they were Europe's first standing army and elite fighting force. As for the ones that were not so militarily inclined, but very educated, they became bureaucrats and also viziers or ministers in the Ottoman setup. What this meant was when the Ottomans had conquered lands in the Balkans, they would send these people in there to govern the land and rule the land. And that would mean that the local populations would see someone ruling them or governing them that was of a local ethnicity, and they wouldn't feel that they were being occupied by an outside force. All these policies helped to start to change the Ottomans from being a Turkic Anatolian administrative setup into a Balkan political machine. This was really good for Rumeli, the Balkans, but it wasn't so good for Anatolia and could potentially cause some problems for the Ottomans down the line. The people living in Constantinople were a disgruntled population because their state was in decline. They were losing land, trade was affected, and the economy wasn't as good as what it used to be. And in that situation, it's the perfect environment for a political opponent to use their sentiments and oust the current ruler. The current ruler was called Emperor John. His son was called Andronicus. Andronicus tried a coup over his father, and it failed, so he had to flee. But where did he flee? He fled to Murad in Edirne, and he asked Murad, can you help me in my attempt to oust my father and so I can become the Byzantine emperor? Murad said, yes, sure, on one condition. If you're successful, you give me some of these outpost lands that you still have. And Andronicus said, yeah, that's fine, I'll do that. So he made his way back to Constantinople, and with the help of Murad, he managed to oust his father, Emperor John, who had to flee. But where did he flee to? He fled to Murad, and he said to Murad, can you help me to get my throne back against my son? Murad said, yes, certainly, on one condition. There's a few more remaining outposts of the Byzantine Empire. If you're successful, you give these lands to me. Emperor John said, okay, fine. So, Emperor John made his way back to Constantinople, and with the help of Murad, he managed to oust his son. But this time he'd learnt his lesson. He had killed his son or blinded his son so he wouldn't be able to overthrow him. But all these things had shown Murad that the Byzantine Empire was very, very weak. He had played the Game of Thrones perfectly, and he knew now that the Byzantine Empire was going to fall. It was just a matter of time, and it was going to be sooner rather than later. The only thing that was protecting them was the great city walls that had repelled all attempts to conquer the city for over 1,000 years. As for the remaining Turkic tribes in Anatolia who were not yet under the Ottoman Empire, who enjoyed their own independence and did not want to give up their own dominions, Murad I had three main ways to deal with them. The first one is he would marry into someone in their tribe and therefore get a lot of influence into what went on in the Beylik. The second one, he would ask the Beylik to join without fighting and give the Bey of the Beylik, i.e. the prince of the principality, a place in his court, so he'd become a vizier, so he'd become someone high up in the political circles with Murad. And then the third way he had of dealing with them is by fighting them. and for that he would enlist the work of his own son, who was called Bayezid. Bayezid would enact lightning campaigns against these Turkic beyliks and win fast victories, and because of that he got the nickname Yildirim Bayezid, which means Bayezid the Thunderbolt. More on him and his rapid rise and demise coming soon, so stick around. Because the Byzantine Empire was essentially now just a city-state in Constantinople with one or two other little possessions here and there, they were completely surrounded by the Ottomans, and they realized that time is going to come very soon when Murad and the Ottomans are going to change their attention from the Balkans and start to try and conquer Constantinople. And for that reason, they decided they needed some new allies, and they started trying to contact other states in Europe. The primary person who they tried to contact was the Pope, and they asked the Pope, please preach a crusade, get people to come and fight these Ottomans and rid them from Rumeli, southeastern Europe. And the Pope said, yeah, okay, we can do that, just one condition: we need you to convert to Catholicism and come under the papacy. The Byzantine emperor said, yeah, fine, we'll do that, but in the end he never would. The other thing he would do is he would ask the Serbian Empire and the Bulgarian empires to ally together and fight the Ottomans. And all this maneuvering resulted in a famous battle in 1389 between the Ottomans and a coalition of Serbian states. And it was a battle that that effects would be felt in the Balkans for centuries to come, and it was called the Battle of Kosovo. Overall command for this Serbian coalition was given to a man called Lazar, and Murad, fighting on his side, had his two sons. One was called Bayezid and the other one was called Yaqub, each on either flank. The battle started and it was a complete stalemate, and then all of a sudden, for unknown reasons, one member of this Serbian coalition decided that they were going to leave the battlefield, and it was at that moment that the tide was firmly on the Ottoman side, and Murad ordered his troops forward, his Balkan-based Janissaries and his Turkish Anatolian Ghazi warrior cavalry. And then they completely encircled the enemy, and they were annihilated, including Lazar, the leader of the Serbian coalition. But there was one problem. When Murad ordered his troops forward, he left himself completely isolated. One Serbian soldier saw an opportunity. He crept up by himself and did a stealth mission and managed to stab Murad and kill him. Therefore, both leaders in the battle, Lazar and Murad, had died. As a result of winning the Battle of Kosovo, the Ottomans managed to gain parts of Serbia, Albania, Bulgaria and Greece. There was just one problem though. The Sultan was dead and the issue of succession had not been decided yet. So they were leaderless, the Balkans had not been fully subjugated, the project in Rumeli was in the balance, and what would happen now would have shockwaves in the Ottoman Empire for the next 300 years.